Imagine two fathers. One has a college degree, a stable government job, and a good salary. The other never finished high school, but by the age of 50 had become one of the richest people in Hawaii. Two men, two completely different relationships with money, and one boy caught in between them, absorbing lessons from both. The first taught his son the traditional path: go to school, get good grades, find a secure job, and work your way up. The second taught something that sounded almost backwards at the time. Money should work for you. You should not spend your life working for money. This is a real story from the childhood of Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Since its release in 1997, the book has sold more than 40 million copies worldwide and remains one of the most discussed, most recommended, and most argued about personal finance books ever written.
It has been translated into dozens of languages, spent years on bestseller lists, and shaped how an entire generation thinks about the difference between being an employee and being an investor. Today we are going to go through this book in depth, not just the surface-level idea everyone already knows, but the actual 6 lessons the book is built around, the reasoning behind each one, the real-life context of Kiyosaki's own upbringing, and just as importantly, the serious criticism the book has received over the years. By the end, you will understand not just what the book claims, but how to think about those claims critically, and what you can realistically take from it and apply to your own life, even if you have no plans of becoming an entrepreneur or investor.
Let's start with some background, because understanding where these ideas came from tells you a lot about why the book is written the way it is. Robert Kiyosaki grew up in Hilo, Hawaii. His biological father, whom he refers to throughout the book as the poor dad, was a highly educated man. He held a doctorate degree and eventually became the head of the education system for the entire state of Hawaii. By every conventional measure, this was a successful man, respected in his community, well-educated, secure in his career. The rich dad in the book is not related to Kiyosaki by blood. He was the father of Kiyosaki's childhood best friend, Mike. This man had not finished high school. He started as a small business owner and, through decades of investing in real estate and businesses, became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii by the time he reached his 50s.
Starting at age 9, Kiyosaki and his friend Mike began spending time after school with Mike's father, who used every opportunity, sometimes through actual jobs he gave the boys, sometimes just through conversation, to teach them how he thought about money. The book is structured as a recollection of these lessons, spread out over years of Kiyosaki's childhood and young adulthood. It's worth pointing out clearly, before we go further, this book is not a technical manual. It doesn't walk you through how to open a brokerage account, doesn't give you a specific stock to buy, doesn't give you a step-by-step real estate acquisition strategy. If you're looking for that kind of practical, actionable, technical instruction, this is not that book. What this book offers instead is something more foundational, a shift in how you think about money, assets, work, and risk.
Whether that shift is useful to you or not is something we'll examine as we go. So what is the actual central idea the entire book revolves around? Kiyosaki puts it simply: the difference between rich people and poor people is not how much money they earn. It's what they do with the money after they earn it. This sounds almost too simple, but it's the foundation for everything else in the book. To make this idea concrete, Kiyosaki introduces 2 terms that have since become extremely widely used in personal finance conversations, well beyond just this book. An asset, in Kiyosaki's definition, is anything that puts money into your pocket. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. Now, this is important. These are not the standard accounting definitions you'd find in a finance textbook. Kiyosaki is using a simplified, practical version of these terms.
Under his definition, your primary home, if you're paying a mortgage on it, is a liability, not an asset, because it costs you money every month, regardless of whether it appreciates in value over time. A car you're financing is a liability. Expensive clothes, consumer electronics, anything you buy that requires ongoing spending without generating income falls into this category. On the other side, dividend-paying stocks, rental properties that generate positive cash flow, a business that produces income even when you're not actively working in it, these are assets because they put money into your pocket on an ongoing basis.
Here is the pattern Kiyosaki claims to have observed. Poor and middle-class people tend to spend their income on liabilities that look like symbols of success. The nicer car, the bigger house, the new phone every year. And as their income grows, their liabilities grow right alongside it. Wealthy people, according to Kiyosaki, do the opposite. They prioritize acquiring assets first, and only once those assets are generating sufficient income do they use that income to purchase luxuries. This is really the philosophical spine that the rest of the book hangs on. Everything from here forward expands on this basic asset versus liability framework in different directions. Now, let's go through the 6 specific lessons the book presents, one at a time, because each one adds a different layer to this core idea.
The first lesson, and arguably the most provocative one in the entire book, is this: the rich don't work for money. Kiyosaki frames this around 2 emotions that he says drive most people's financial decisions their entire lives: fear and greed. Here's how he describes the cycle. A person feels fear, specifically the fear of not having enough money, of being unable to pay bills, of financial insecurity. That fear drives them to go get a job. Once they receive their paycheck, a different emotion takes over: greed, or more specifically, the desire to feel good, to reward themselves, to buy something that makes them feel successful or comfortable. So they spend the paycheck. Once it's spent, the fear returns, because now they're back to having little or no money. So they go back to work, and the cycle repeats itself indefinitely. Kiyosaki's rich dad had a specific name for this cycle: the rat race. It's the image of a rat running on a wheel, expending enormous amounts of energy, moving very fast, but never actually going anywhere. The person is working hard, often for decades, without ever making meaningful progress toward financial independence, because every dollar earned is immediately consumed by expenses that grow in lockstep with income. It's worth being precise about what this lesson is actually telling you to do, because it's easy to misread it as quit your job or don't work for money at all. That is not what Kiyosaki is arguing. The lesson is about awareness, recognizing that fear and greed are driving your spending decisions, and consciously interrupting that cycle by redirecting a portion of your income, even a small portion, away from consumption and toward acquiring assets.
It doesn't require quitting your job. It requires changing what happens to the money after you earn it. The second lesson shifts from mindset to skill set. It's about the importance of financial literacy, specifically being able to read and understand financial information, as opposed to simply focusing on earning a higher salary. Kiyosaki makes a point that surprises a lot of readers. He describes multiple examples of people with very high incomes, doctors, lawyers, high-level executives, who nonetheless struggle financially or live paycheck to paycheck, despite earning substantial salaries. His explanation is that a high income without financial literacy doesn't lead to wealth. It leads to a higher standard of living, because expenses simply expand to match whatever is coming in.
This is where Kiyosaki introduces the concept of cash flow as the primary tool for understanding your financial position, more important in his view than your salary or net income. Cash flow isn't about how much money arrives. It's about tracking where that money goes once it arrives, and specifically whether any portion of it is being converted into something that generates further income. The practical implication here, especially for someone watching this who isn't planning to become an investor or entrepreneur, is this: before focusing exclusively on trying to earn more, it's worth taking an honest look at where your current income is actually going, and identifying whether any of your regular expenses could be restructured to build toward an asset instead of disappearing into pure consumption.
The third lesson introduces a distinction that sounds like a contradiction at first: mind your own business. Kiyosaki draws a sharp line between 2 things that most people conflate: your profession, meaning the job or career you use to generate income, and your business, meaning the assets you're building outside of that job, whatever you invest in during the hours you're not working. He gives an example from his own life. He worked for Xerox for several years, not because he wanted a career in copier sales, but because he specifically wanted to learn sales skills he felt he lacked. While working there, drawing an income and learning that skill, he was simultaneously using money outside of work to acquire small real estate investments and start early business ventures.
His job was funding his life and teaching him something valuable, but it was not, in his framing, his actual business. His actual business was the separate column of assets he was quietly building on the side. The lesson here is that regardless of whether you're employed, self-employed, or between things, there should be a separate, ongoing effort to grow what Kiyosaki calls your asset column, a collection of things that generate income independent of your job title. The fourth lesson gets more technical, and it's also the one that requires the most caveats when applying it today. The rich use legal structures, particularly corporations, to access financial and tax advantages that aren't available to individual employees in the same way.
Kiyosaki explains, using the American tax and business environment of the 1990s as his backdrop, how forming a business entity can allow certain expenses to be paid before taxes are calculated, rather than after, which is generally the case for a regular salaried employee. This section of the book gets into some detail about corporate structures and tax treatment specific to that time and place. Here's the important caveat, and it's one worth taking seriously. This part of the book reflects the U.S. tax code as it existed roughly 3 decades ago. Tax law changes over time, and it varies enormously by country. If you're watching this outside the United States, or even inside the United States today, you should not treat the specific mechanisms described in this section as current, actionable advice.
What's more durable about this lesson isn't the specific tax strategy. It's the underlying principle that financial and legal systems are learnable, and that treating them as too complicated to bother understanding puts you at a disadvantage compared to people who take the time to learn how those systems actually work. The fifth lesson is a bit more abstract. The rich invent money. What Kiyosaki means by this is the ability to recognize an opportunity, a deal, an underpriced asset, a gap in the market, where someone else would simply see an obstacle or see nothing at all. He refers to this as financial IQ, essentially a trained ability to evaluate opportunities that require some combination of knowledge, confidence, and willingness to take a calculated risk. Opportunities that a person without that training would either not notice or would be too fearful to act on.
The sixth and final lesson is about how you should evaluate a job, especially early in your working life. Work to learn, not to earn. Kiyosaki's advice here is that when you're early in your career, the specific skill you pick up doing a job, whether that's sales, public speaking, negotiation, leadership, communication, is often far more valuable over the following decades than an extra few $100s a month in salary. He specifically encourages young people to seek out roles that will teach them skills they're weak in, rather than simply chasing the highest available paycheck, because those skills compound in value over an entire career, while a small salary difference at the start of your career typically does not. That covers the 6 core lessons of the book. Now, to give you a complete and honest picture, we need to talk about the criticism, because Rich Dad, Poor Dad has faced substantial pushback since its publication, and understanding that criticism is part of understanding the book responsibly. First, there are serious questions about the factual basis of the book's central story. Several financial writers and journalists have investigated the claims around the existence of the Rich Dad character and have not been able to independently verify that this specific mentor existed as described. Kiyosaki himself has, at different points, described the Rich Dad as being based on a composite of people he knew, rather than a single verifiable individual. This doesn't necessarily invalidate the lessons themselves, but it does mean the book should be read more as an extended parable illustrating a philosophy, rather than as a strictly documented memoir. Second, critics have pointed out that the book is very light on the topic of risk. It's written in a tone that consistently encourages readers toward investing and entrepreneurship, but it spends very little time discussing the fact that a large number of real estate investments fail, a large number of small businesses fail, and that leverage, borrowing money to invest, which Kiyosaki generally speaks about favorably, can just as easily amplify losses as it can amplify gains. A reader who takes only the encouragement from this book without pairing it with a serious understanding of risk management could end up making decisions that are considerably more dangerous than the book's tone would suggest.
Third, as we already touched on with the fourth lesson, a meaningful portion of the book's specific financial and tax advice is tied to the American economic and legal environment of the 1990s. Real estate market conditions, tax codes, and available legal business structures have all changed since then, both within the United States and obviously in every other country. Following the letter of these specific strategies today, rather than the general principle behind them, would be a mistake. Given all of that, how should you actually think about this book? Probably not as a financial textbook or a rule book to be followed literally.
It's better understood as a book about mindset, specifically about challenging the assumption that a stable paycheck and steady employment are automatically the safest or smartest path to financial security. With that framing, and with the caveats we just went through kept firmly in mind, the book still holds real value, even nearly 3 decades after it was written. So if you had to walk away from this entire book with just one practical habit, what would it be? Probably this: before you make a purchase, pause and ask yourself a simple question. Is this an asset, something that will put money back into my pocket over time? Or is this a liability, something that will continue taking money out of my pocket after I've bought it? This is not a call to eliminate every comfort in your life or to quit a stable job in pursuit of some entrepreneurial fantasy.
It's simply an invitation to look at your own financial decisions through a slightly different lens, and perhaps to start with something small, taking an honest look at where your income is actually going right now, today, and asking whether any part of it could be redirected towards something that builds value over time, rather than something that simply disappears the moment you spend it.